I gave you the powers as a host, so you can do it. Let me introduce you, if you don't mind.
Very kind of you, thank you.
Yeah. So welcome everyone to our new Digital Marketing Malaga Meetup. Today we have OJ Shannon. He's got a bachelor degree in history from the University of Manchester, although he hates Manchester United as much as Tottenham. As he probably knew that earning a decent salary with history was going to be difficult, he has developed his career in marketing in the financial sector. He started in a consulting company called Knowledge Brief, and then later moved to a fintech company called ITRS. In that company, we met and worked together, creating a marketing dream team led by one of our attendees today, called Rebecca. Say hello, Rebecca, please. I'm going to unmute you.
You unmuted me as I unmuted me. Hello.
Okay, thanks.
I'll even put my camera on for a little bit so you can see that I really am here and I do exist.
Okay.
Hey, thanks.
All right. I've been making lots of notes, so.
No pressure.
So in ITRS, after a couple of years and suffering the annoyance of a pushy and cocaine-addicted sales team, he decided to move on a new company and started with the fixed income investment company called PIMCO. If you're from Malaga, there are some rumors that said that PIMCO are the real owners of El Pimpi. And besides that, they also own all the pensions funds from Spain, Italy, and other countries. So 3 years later, OJ felt so bad with how he was stealing money from all people that he decided to move to BNP Paribas to work for one of the biggest French banks, which is a little bit disgrace for him. But that's it. So go on, OJ. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you, Louise. You know myself better than I do. Yeah, I haven't probably much got to follow on from that. But thanks thanks Louise for having me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Hopefully, I can equip you with something interesting, but I can't guarantee that. I will try and share my screen. Maybe, Louise, if you give me a thumbs up, can you see that? You can. Brilliant. Okay. Sorry, it has been a while since I've used PowerPoint, so bear with me. Cool. So you can all see that? Great. Okay, so I'll skip this. I'll skip this slide. Basically, a very old picture of me and some of the details Louise just covered. But I work in digital marketing at BNP Paribas in London, and today I'm going to hopefully tell you, or I'll try and tell you, two things. First of which is how to attract web visitors, and the second is how to retain them. As this slide references, predominantly going to be focused on SEO here and associated practices with SEO. Obviously, as marketers, we all know that there's more ways than one of attracting web visitors, but I'm focused on SEO. My background, as Louise mentioned earlier, is across both channel marketing, digital marketing, and content marketing. So very much a jack of all trades, but for the past 4 to 5 years, I've been focused on content and digital content, if you will. So I like to think that kind of that experience or exposure gives me kind of a unique side in that I've been on the content team, and then I've been on the side that is, let's say, more the actual digital team. So I share the pain points of both teams. So hopefully, as I said, I can bring you some insights today. I'll run through this briefly, but I think probably most of us know, but SEO, or search engine optimization, is a traffic driving strategy or acquisition strategy focused on growing your visibility in the SERPs, so the search engine results pages, so the likes of Google. There are others, but I think increasingly, Google is definitely the main. So I will probably rather flippantly just refer to Google throughout this. So that's the boring. Oops, sorry. That's that out of the way. Here are kind of some stats. I won't read through all of them, but as to why visibility in search engines is important. Some of these may have changed. These are a few years old, but 3.5 billion Google searches are made every day. I think that's something I always find particularly interesting, because I think whenever I'm sat, and it's not very often, but whenever I'm put in an important meeting with senior people, everyone's always focused on what adverts should we be running, what email campaigns should we be doing, and so on and so forth. Some of the more common, or perhaps high kind of impact, I guess you could call them that, channels. But no channel, to my knowledge, really has the same reach as Google or a search engine. If you're advertising, be it traditional, you're probably looking at a handful of publications, or if you're going programmatic, again, you're maybe looking at perhaps a whitelist of certain publications. I would say with a high degree of certainty, none of them are going to give you the potential exposure to 3.5 billion people. So I think that's always something worth bearing in mind, that whilst we tend to focus on, be it display, email, social media, etc., the likes of search engines are really a large audience that often remain untapped. So continuing on from that, 93% of experiences begin with a search engine, and then likewise 73% or 75% even of users never scroll past the first page. So I think that just shows that really, if you are on the second page of Google, that in itself is of course an achievement, but your goal is the first page, the top 10 links. It's on a slide in a few minutes, but the links that are on, say, the second page of Google generally get around 0.3% of clicks, and that's a very useful thing to bear in mind when you are targeting keywords, which as I said, I'll come on to in a second. And then lastly, 73% of all links users click are organic. So again, I think that just goes to show, often we'll be, what I was mentioning earlier, we'll be very focused on PPC, search engine advertising, but often, the thing that is most overlooked is actually the organic element, and that may, be actually giving you far more traffic, and of course it's free. Okay, cool. So they're just some stats that hopefully underline the importance of SEO. So I think, the next most obvious thing to discuss is what determines where your page ranks. This is a curated list. The actual full list itself would be probably into the hundreds, and I won't pretend to know all of those, particularly those on the right. So generally, I think people kind of slice SEO into two buckets: page level and site level, or technical and non-technical, on page and off page. So they're all kind of mean the same thing. I, for my sins, just from my background, I'm more focused on this left column, so the page level factors, which is what I'm going to talk about today. But it's equally important to remember that there are two elements to SEO, and just on the site level factors, there are things like your domain trust or your authority. A large factor of that is how many backlinks or how many links you have pointing to your website, and that's really used as Google as a measure of trust. If you have a lot of people referencing you, so directing to your website, it looks like you've got good content or you're saying something valuable. Likewise, it's important to have a good sitemap so that your site's easily crawlable and indexable by the bots. So they're the things that Google spiders that crawl your website for information, and they're effectively how Google makes sense of your page. So the easier you make it for them to explore and index and crawl your page or your whole website, the better it is for SEO. Likewise, the speed. No one likes a slow website, let's all be honest. Again, this is often out of our hands. This may sit with an IT department, but it's something to bear in mind. Particularly here, and this is true of a lot of SEO elements, if your site speed is slow, people will often get frustrated and leave. An important side thing that Google is often looking at is user data. So the data that you see in Google Analytics. If there's a high bounce rate from a website, Google's looking into that, saying, something going wrong here, and that can affect where you appear. So site speed and other things, equally, the design, if it's hard to use or looks ugly, and people will end up, leaving it very quickly. Google is using the data from analytics, to measure and track that and come up with an idea of perhaps, your website isn't that great. And equally, the SSL certificates of whether your site is secure, so HTTPS. And I said there's many more there. They're just some of the ones that I know a little bit about. And then onto the left column, so the page level factors. So I'll give you a lot more detail on these. So that's topic, keywords, meta description, links and anchor text, quality and format. I should add that quality and format, and to some extent links as well, they do also make up how we retain people. But as I was saying, so as in how you please people once they've arrived at your page, whereas the first three are mainly how someone finds your page. But as I said, things like quality leads to someone staying on your site for longer, so increasing your dwell time. And that's something Google is tracking. So again, whilst I've put them in the section that is on how to please or how to retain your visitors, they are also a factor in just the actual SEO ranking, so attracting people in the first place. But I will move away from this slide now. So topic is the first thing I just mentioned in the previous slide, and this is for me where I start always, and it's the big picture. And selecting a topic can be a difficult thing. Of course, I think, depending on your industry, that's kind of a natural filter. But, where just in my case, I work at a bank or an investment manager. We sell lots of different products. So, different things. So often it's not clear. And I will add, this isn't my job anymore, but in previous asset managers, it was my job. I wouldn't often know where to start. So the kind of way I'd approach it would be both qualitative, so just basically conversation, and quantitative, so more numbers based. Qualitative, I would often speak to client-facing colleagues. They are, a very, very useful resource. They know your clients often better than you do, particularly in a B2B scenario. So I'd always, speak to them to see if they can tell you, what topics clients are either interested in, or, what challenges they're facing. And then that can inform the quantitative side of things. So on the quantitative, again, you've got client surveys, which I guess are similar to speaking to your sales team. I think this is a hard thing to execute, but where I have seen it done at a previous firm, PIMCO, was amazing. They do a survey every half year, and we'd really get it would basically focus us on what topics clients are either finding challenging or interested in for the next 6 months. So that is a really good way to have topics, or like a pre-built list of topics to perhaps inform your content calendar. Equally, in Google Analytics, you can look at, say, what articles are trending. Again, one thing I've seen done very well at a previous firm of mine, and something I'm trying to implement at my current firm, is implementing tags across all web pages, particularly product pages and thought leadership, or your content. So coming up with, say, 5 or 10 pages, tagging all of those. So let's just say you tag article 1, 2, and 3 are tagged equities or stocks, and then some of the funds are also tagged stocks. And then that information feeds into Google Analytics. And what you can start to do is, once you have all your content tagged, you can begin to come up with trends to see, right, in Google Analytics, show me how this tag is performing month on month. Is it increasing or has it gone down? If it's increased month on month or quarter over quarter, that for me is an indication that we maybe should be writing about that tag or that topic. Likewise, you could, if you've got 2 topics that are, say, increasing in traffic, and I would add that I would always look to filter by organic traffic, because let's say if topic 1 has a campaign running on it and topic 2 doesn't, if you're including all channels, then of course topic 1, which has the campaign running, is going to probably have higher traffic. So if you use organic, you get a real sense of what the market is actually searching for, or what the market is interested in, as opposed to what you're pushing. So if you search your tags by organic traffic, you can actually begin to see, what topic is trending, and it's often useful to compare 2 to one another. So if 2 topics of interest, or are increasing in traffic month to month, maybe you should select the one that has increased most out of those 2. And similarly, you can apply this approach using Google Trends, which is a free tool. Most of you or some of you know about it, and I've just shown you an example here. So let's say, like the good Brit I am looking to go on holiday to Spain. and I'm torn between Malaga and Seville. This is me as a customer. If I am, let's say, a Spanish or an English, whatever it may be, travel agent, I want to try and decide which destination, should I be promoting, which destination is more popular. So I can go into Google Trends and type in Malaga and type in Sevilla, and then see which is more popular. This is it's a number of 0 to 100. So this isn't actually like there's 100 searches, rather just it's a measure of popularity. And what I can see from this is that Malaga generally is more popular. I'm sure Louise is very happy about that. Whereas Sevilla is less popular. However, more recently, as I can see by the blue line, Sevilla is, increasing slightly, whereas Malaga has been decreasing. So these are some of the insights I can get from this. But the main thing that I would take from this example is that Malaga is more popular, and Malaga peaks, so traffic peaks or interest peaks in Malaga every summer. So those are the peaks that I've highlighted there. So that would tell me, right, if I'm a travel agent or a holiday company and I need to try and promote one Spanish city or in the Costa del Sol to English people, it's going to be Malaga, and I'm going to promote it in summer. That's when there's the most interest. So these are some of the free tools you can use to help you to basically identify a topic. And as I said, that is free. So once you've got your topic, which as I said is the highest point, then you need to start looking at keywords, which becomes a bit more complicated, but not too complicated. So the keywords are the words and phrases in your web content that make it possible for people to find your site. So as an example, if I was trying to sell holidays to Malaga, I'd probably include something like Malaga holidays, cheap Malaga holidays in whatever content I'm writing. Just as an example, because that's probably what my people or my customers are going to be using. But you need to get scientific about this process and assign and research the actual words and put data behind them. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Just before that, I'd say, so what I've always done, I think generally industry standard, is to follow a primary keyword and secondary keyword strategy. In that, so when you're looking in your research, you have one keyword which is your primary, and this is the main keyword, such as Malaga holidays, and then secondary keywords which support that primary keywords. That might be Malaga trips or something like that. I'll give you an example on the next slide. But what I'm trying to say is that whenever you're doing your research, don't just be looking for one word. Be looking for like a group of maybe 5 to 6 words. Again, being a good Brit, beer is of close interest to me. So here's just an example of, let's say, the topic ale. That may be my primary keyword. In reality, I would probably never use a word like ale, and I'll explain why, just because it's, there's going to be so much competition for it. But let's just, start afresh and without the competition in mind. So if we're looking at ale, that would be my primary keyword, and then I'll be looking for words that support that primary keyword. So here beneath that, in the second row, you see bitter and Indian pale ale. So they're different types of ales. And then beneath bitter, you have light bitter and special bitter. And under Indian pale ale, you have American IPA and English IPA. Again, so these are all set like supporting, or if not synonyms of the primary keyword. So, as an example that I mentioned earlier, you've got holidays, you've got trips, vacations, etc. So start just thinking in terms of what's the main one, and I'll come on to how you choose your main one, but then what are the words that add or support that primary keyword. So how do you identify your primary keyword and your secondary keyword? Again, there's lots and lots of ways of doing so. The tool I am most familiar with and one I like, I don't work for them, so don't worry, there's no interest in me pushing this, but is Moz, and they have a keyword explorer. They actually have a free version of this, so I think you can get around, I've forgotten which amount, but you can definitely get some free searches every month using Moz. And Moz, when you type in your keyword, will provide 3 metrics: the monthly volume, the difficulty, and the organic click-through rate. I'll just explain what those are. These are specific to Moz, but generally every platform or tool will use similar ones. So the monthly volume is an average of how many times that specific keyword is searched on Google. And you can tailor that by, say, putting it in UK, Spain, US, etc. The difficulty is a score of 0 to 100, and that measures as a percentage the likelihood of you being able to get to the top 10 links to the first page, which, as I said, is really your goal. Then the organic click-through rate, again, which is a percentage. Oh, sorry, difficulty isn't a percentage. Organic click-through rate is. And that will basically tell you how much PPC, or paid pay-per-click, or search engine advertising is running against that keyword. So if I see a high organic click-through rate, that means that organic links receive the majority of traffic, and there's probably not much PPC going on that keyword. So again, you want to look for a high organic click-through rate. So once you've kind of got these, understood these metrics, you can have a better idea of choosing a primary keyword. As I said, normally you just start by typing in something into Moz like Malaga, and then it will give you loads of different suggestions, and then you can look through those using that data to choose your primary keyword. But what I should add is that often, the word you find is perhaps got very high difficulty. So what you often want to do is find the word that you think is relevant to your business, and something you've got expertise on, and something that you can talk about, and something that is searched. But then consider making it slightly more targeted, which is a practice known as long tail keywords. So that's where you would start off with a high traffic keyword such as Malaga, and as I'll show in the next example, you will then change that to Malaga holidays. So this is Moz here. I've typed in the first example, you can just see Malaga, and you see great, it's got between 30 to 70,000 searches a month. And here are the difficulty, organic click-through rate, and priority. We can ignore priority for now. And then you see Malaga holidays beneath it, which is a long tail keyword. And as you can see, the difficulty is far less. So that means I'm far more likely to rank for that. But the annoying thing is that the volume is far less. So I think, the problem a lot of marketers will then say is, well, of course, I want to rank for the higher keywords, so Malaga. But you have to bear in mind the difficulty. And this chart over now, which hopefully you can see, will just show why it's better often to go for the long tail keyword. So if as I said, we chose Malaga holidays, and that had a difficulty of, I think, around 30. So we're far more likely to rank for that. So let's just say we get number 1 for Malaga holidays. That gives us a click-through rate of around 32.5%. And given that there's an 800, the upper bound for that is 850. So that keyword gets 850 a month. If you times that or work that out, that actually, sorry, I'm not sure if you can see. 1 second. Sorry. Can you see the bottom of my screen, or can you see the people? Okay, there we are. So if you now, you should be able to see that. That works out that we get 276 clicks per month. So we're far more likely to be able to reach the first page, or the position 1 for Malaga holidays. And that would give us 276 clicks if we get around 32.5%, which is roughly what you should be getting if you're in position number 1. However, if you chose Malaga, which, as we said, is the far more popular term, but because of its difficulty, we're not really likely to be able to get to position number 1. And realistically, we probably won't even get onto the first page because there's going to be so many, that you think Malaga, there might be travel companies, there might be council or government websites, there might be museums, bars, etc. The likelihood of you reaching the first page is unlikely. So as I said, anything beyond the first 10 links basically gets a click-through rate of under 1%. It's around 0.35 to 0.37%. So if you think about that, that means that whilst you may have chosen the higher volume keyword, you'll actually only end up getting 262 clicks per month, assuming you don't get to page 1, which is probably the most likely thing. So if you think about it in those terms, it's far more profitable to target a low traffic keyword or a lower traffic keyword and rank number 1 for it than it is to target a high traffic keyword and not rank well for it. And, if you just look at the data here, this one there's not much in it. There's only around 20 clicks difference. but it's still 20 more clicks that you'd be getting. And if the numbers were different, obviously this would perhaps be a larger amount. But I think that just goes to show that it's far better to target a specific keyword, a long tail keyword, than it is something that is, say, very popular but very difficult to achieve. So then once you've got your keyword through that process, so the keyword exploration process, so you've got a primary keyword and then you've got words that support that, it's time to actually begin using them. And some of the places you can use them are in the meta description and title tags, which are the next couple of slides. But these are, these elements are also more than just the keyword. And I'll explain this now. So the meta description is a snippet of text on the search engine result page that, it's those 2 lines often beneath the link that will, in most purposes, entice or excite or encourage the reader to click through to your page. So there's several things you need to do on the meta description. It's not a direct ranking factor in your rank on the SERP or the results page, but it is something Google measures in terms of if you're getting a high click-through rate, you're getting more traffic, and more traffic indicates to Google that the page is popular. So it's one of these kind of shadow or secondary factors, but it's not a specific ranking factor in Google's eyes. But anyway, your meta description should capture readers' attention. So try and make it interesting. Try and offer, a summary or the benefit of reading this page. Contain your target keyword. So when someone searches your keyword, it will be put in bold in the meta description. So if I type Malaga holidays, just in that example, and my meta description includes that, that will come up in bold. And again, that's proven to pique someone's interest or capture their attention. And again, it should contain a click call to action. So, read more, learn more, explore, discover, etc. And then equally, it needs to be around 160 characters or 920 pixels. Any more than that, and you'll get the ... so the ellipsis, which means, your well-written meta description isn't being displayed. So just bear those in mind when you are writing your meta descriptions. And then equally in your tags, there's 3 main tags that we use: H1s, H2s, and H3s. The H1 is the article title. And, with that, you should be using 1 per page of around 20 to 70 characters. You can use more, but if you use 1, that signals to Google that this is where you want to focus their attention. So the H1 carries a lot of power in terms of, or significance in terms of SEO ranking factor. And similar to a meta description, it should describe your page, but again, engagingly and clearly. You want to avoid wordplay. So you don't want to be perhaps referencing Shakespeare or something that's not easy for people to understand. Make sure that it's clear, and at the same extent, trying to be exciting. And as with the meta description, you should always use your keyword, preferably towards the beginning of the title. Again, this is shown that on the search engine results page, if you have your primary keyword to the beginning, so your eye is often drawn to the left. So the sooner someone sees the keyword, the more likely they are to click through. Whereas if you have your keyword, let's say at the end of the title, because bear in mind the H1 will appear on the page and the page itself and on the search engine. If it's to the right of it on the search engine, the person may miss it. So always try and make sure that it's at the beginning of the title. And then H2s and H3s, these carry slightly less significance in terms of ranking factors, but they're a good place to include your secondary keywords, so the words that support your primary keyword. And they are also a good way just to break up the signal sections. So as I said, this is a very important formatting technique. And again, whilst this isn't necessarily a direct ranking factor, if someone's on your page, staying on your page, as I mentioned earlier, that looks good in Google's eyes. So in H2s and H3s, use them to break up your article, use them to format it properly, but also use them to include your secondary keywords, which again, are just helping to boost your ranking. And then alt text, this is probably the element people most forget, and it's probably the hardest just because can be a bit tedious. But the alt text is the text that screen readers use either to display, perhaps say to a visually impaired person, or perhaps to understand, well, one if the image doesn't render, but 2, just to also understand the image. Obviously, we as humans can interpret and understand an image quite easily, whereas a Google robot can't do so. They're getting better, but they can't do with ease. So including a description of the image. So like, if it's this image in the background here, you might say New York, or no, that don't know if that is New York, but whatever city it may be, maybe Shanghai, I don't know, Hong Kong, wherever, you would use that just to signal to the Google bot that this is what the image is about. And again, and if you can, use your keywords, but don't try and stuff them in there, because then you can actually be penalized for that. So make sure it's natural. But this is just another way of telling Google that your article is about this topic. And then lastly, your links. So you've got internal links and external links. Internal links should map to similar pages on your site. So for instance, if you have an article about product A, you should naturally link to product A at the bottom. Or if you have, an article about product A, an article on topic A, and there's other articles in the past about topic A, make sure you link or include them in the body of the article as hyperlinks or as calls to action. And this is helping Google again to understand that, you're talking about topic A, and this is also about topic A. So it builds that topical connection, and equally demonstrates that you're, a subject matter expert. If you have lots of articles on a topic, again, it looks favorable in Google's eyes, and should reflect in your rank on the search engine. Equally, external links help. Really, this is something to help the user. So they help to create a better experience, which, as I said, then helps to keep someone on the page. In this instance, it's actually sending them away from the page, but it's using Google, or it's a way Google measures your authority on the matter, and if users value your content. One thing, as I said, with external links, you are actually sending someone to another site, so you should always ensure that when you do use one, make sure it opens in a new tab. I think things that you often find, like a common use of an external link is, say, Wikipedia for a definition or for an explanation of an event. So just bear in mind external links as well. They can be powerful things. And then, so just the final element on links is the anchor text. So this is the visible bit that you can click on a link. Often what you see, which is probably the worst thing, is just pasting the link. Never do that. Second probably worst thing is using something like click here. And the best thing that you can do, click here as the anchor text, because it doesn't tell the bot anything about the context of the link. Equally, it's not particularly informative. Might not actually encourage someone to click through. So what I'd suggest is always to use what we would say rich or descriptive anchor text. So make sure you have a verb. Try and have your keyword again if it's natural, and try and describe the underlying link, because if you can describe it, not literally saying this is a link on this, but rather the topic of the article, again, it's helping the bot to understand what you're talking about, and builds up this picture of, okay, this article is about topic X. And the more the bots can understand that you're talking about topic X, the higher you're going to rank. So an example of what not to do is, to read our white paper, click here. Sorry, that shouldn't be a question mark. That should be a cross. And then the example beneath is a better example. So for an in-depth review of the direction of the global economy this year, read our 2020 economic outlook. So you can just see there, I think, you'd be more inclined to click on that link. And equally, it's far more obvious to Google what this link is about. So, pay attention to your anchor text. The temptation is always just to say click here, but, it won't penalize you, but you can definitely gain something by using rich anchor text. So the second section is how to retain visitors. I'm conscious I'm talking a lot, so I will pause at the end for questions, should there be any. And as I mentioned at the beginning, these aren't exclusively, editorial things. They do actually have an impact on SEO, because they can help, they improve the data, which Google is looking at. But I've included them in this section just for, I guess, making this a neat presentation. But the two things I want to focus on is the article quality and the format. This is me channeling my inner Frenchman. So there's a quote here in English, but from a famous French person or Frenchman, saying, "I would have written a shorter letter, but I did not have the time," which is something I think that kind of sums up a lot about article quality on the next slide, and that is being succinct and direct. I think if you can write something in less words, it's actually better because it shows that you've got an understanding of the topic. I, for one, I find it easier to write a lot about something just because you've got more words. But, when we're vying and competing for everyone's attention in today's day and age, writing a 5,000 word essay for a blog is not necessarily what you want to be doing. They don't have time to read it, and therefore they're not going to get the full message and probably not appreciate what you're saying. So if you can write something in less words, try do that, but always be succinct and direct. Have a point and make that point and say it in those words. Don't use unnecessary words. Equally, be professional but accessible. Particularly in finance, what we see a lot is people, and this is similar to the third point, but it's throwing out very complex terms. That's not accessible. Again, readers will probably get bored and leave the page. So make sure that what you're saying is well written, professional, but make sure it's accessible so that people want to read. It's interesting and it's not confusing or too complex. Equally, don't always assume too much. I think, again, there's a saying which is sometimes slightly controversial, but write for the most stupid person in the room. Not saying you really want to write for a stupid person, but try and avoid acronyms or jargon, technical jargon, just because, again, someone might not understand it, and that means you're alienating or perhaps creating a poor experience for that person. So try and make things obvious, and similar to the first point, be direct about it. Fourthly, focus on your readers' concerns and not yours. So as opposed to saying, if you're writing an article about a product or a review, as opposed to I said product, as opposed to saying why we think this is great, here are the benefits. Try and write that in the way in which the client understands. So try and talk about how the product solves their challenges. So focus on what they want to hear. Be client-centric. Of course, map out what you want to talk about and the benefits of, let's say, your product, but put it in a way that solves their concerns as opposed to yours. And similarly, move the subject forward by offering a solution or a different view. This can often be very difficult, but I think what you would like to do is perhaps talk about there is this problem, and then perhaps say what your product could say help that problem or solve that problem, or talk about perhaps just a different side that maybe the problem isn't as bad as it seems, or there's positives to come from the situation, something that grabs someone's attention. I think a common thing I saw in finance and probably a lot of media was just like with Brexit, just how many articles were on it, and for me and a lot of other people, I think it was becoming boring. But when you did see a good article was from an investment standpoint, the industry I work in, it was this situation has happened or Brexit has happened. Here are the products you can buy that could take advantage of the situation. Or equally with coronavirus, talk about perhaps the scenario, but then talk about how your products can help with that, be whatever industry you may be. So again, offer that kind of gift to the user, either by talking about a solution or just taking a different stance on the matter, because everyone is realistically going to be talking 9 times out of 10 about the same thing. So you need to find out a way of standing out in a crowded market effectively. So they're just some editorial tips that can help improve the quality of your article. This is more on the actual written word, so a style guide, and I can't stress how important this is. If you don't have one, I would recommend either looking in the Associated Press style guide or the Chicago Press. They're both 2 common ways of creating a style guide and very established ones. The Associated Press is more common in journalism and press, so it's probably the go-to, certainly the one I use. And these are all kind of basically taken from that. But there are certain things that, if you want to create your own style guide, these are just some basic things that you should consider. And even if you don't want to create a style guide, these are things that you should, have written up so that when people are writing, particularly if, you work in a big company and you have a lot of people writing articles, you may be editing them, but it helps if they know what to write in the first place. So as a rule of thumb, you should always use the active voice instead of the passive. So, we think that this is a problem, as opposed to, this may be a problem, we think. It sounds more engaging, it's more direct. Agree your spelling. two good examples for, I think, everyone in this room. Do you use UK English colour, or do you use US English colour? Don't know why I reverted to Spanish there. Do you use colour, American? Equally, do you use Spanish or traditional Spanish, or do you use Latin American Spanish? I think to some extent, in Spain, that's probably fairly obvious which you should be using, but often with English, there's a whole debate as to whether you use UK or US. So I don't think there's one right or the wrong way. Try and use what's more common in your market, but just make sure that you agree it. Because if it starts to, for a reader, it starts to look really poor if you one article spell it color and then the next article you spell it color. So just think about those things. Likewise, think about abbreviations. Spell them out the first time unless it's really obvious. Like if it's the BBC, I don't think you need to necessarily spell that out. But if it's something more complex like the European Central Bank, make sure the first time you use it, you say that, and then thereafter you can say the ECB. Similarly, avoid unnecessary capitalization. This isn't a huge thing, but I think it's something that can annoy people when you start to see random words capitalized. There's a spelling mistake in there. Sorry, that should be in the meeting, which is another important point. Always proof and check your work. But yeah, try and avoid unnecessary capitalization. I think it can just look awkward. And then spell out numbers below 10. So if you're saying 1, spell it out O-N-E. And if you're using figures above 10, or if you're using numbers above 10, use figures for that. Again, there isn't a right or wrong way of doing that, but I think that's just the industry standard. And again, it's just about consistency, because I think all these things, they're all personal preference to some extent, but if they start to vary across articles or indeed within an article, it doesn't look very professional, and it again can annoy people. And so the last thing, or second to last thing, is the format. There's no, again, with quality, it's a very subjective thing, but some things I would like to flag is just to always use an introduction and a conclusion. A very old adage is, for presentations and articles, is, tell them what you're going to tell them in the introduction, tell them what you were going to tell them in the body, so the paragraphs beneath the introduction, and then in the conclusion, remind them of what you've told them. That's just a very nice structure to follow when you are writing content. But as part of that, always have an introduction and always have a conclusion. Similar to the slides prior to this, try breaking up your text using the subheaders. Again, there is SEO value to this, but there's also real value to the user, so that they can see what the article is about. It's nicely formatted. It will encourage them to read on, and again, improve your dwell time and hopefully just the overall experience with it. It also offers multiple entrance points. So, if someone just scrolls right to the bottom or the second to last paragraph, there's a header about it, so they can quickly grasp the concepts of the article. Try using bulleted or numbered lists. Again, this can help to break up the text. And equally use images, charts, or embed social media. These are all things, and videos as well. These are all things that again can help contribute to a better experience. Of course, videos and images can be time consuming, as can charts. But just something to consider, there are multiple ways of telling a story. It doesn't always need to be pure text. And lastly, just bold occasional words and sentences. This is, again, can be something that has SEO value. So it focuses the bot's attention on the word in bold. So, perhaps include a secondary keyword in bold, but equally, again, it helps to draw the user's attention to a specific sentence and can help break up the monotony. There's nothing worse when you just look at an article, it's just all text. There's no headers, there's nothing in bold. For me, that's a no-no. I think if they've not taken the time to think about how this should look, they've probably not taken the time to think about the actual quality or the written word. So I'll often just leave that immediately. Maybe I'm a bit weird, but that's something to consider. So per my recommendation, tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them it, and then remind them of what you told them. Hopefully I have hopefully I've done that. If I haven't, apologies, I failed. But search engines, per the statistics on the first slide, are very, very important in how content is consumed and distributed now. For me, I think it's definitely the largest channel. It's replaced offline. So really think about SEO when you are writing your stuff. It can be time consuming, but it will be very worthwhile in the long run. And then, adhering to some of the practices of both SEO and from an editorial standpoint, discussed in this deck, won't necessarily get you to position number one. A lot of that will depend on the actual keywords you choose and the quality of the article, but adhering to some of the things we've discussed in this presentation can hopefully improve your visibility and get you closer to the top 10 links. So that is it from me. You're probably sick of my voice. I'll hand back over to Louise. I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
No worries.
So I think that we have a few questions. Heather, can you repeat the question that you just wrote on the chat?
Sure. So what I said is I also work in digital marketing in the financial sector. I've been in my role for about 6 months now, and I've gone from the retail and e-commerce sector to the financial sector, which has been very different in terms of keyword searching and content. And I have struggled with the keyword researchers as such. As I said in my question, I'm facing low volume searches of low competition, but also low click-through, low organic ranking, because the pieces are quite technical. So I just wondered if you had any advice or any, cases there where, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think finance can be a tricky one, just because I'll admit I like finance and I'm a geek, but it's probably not the most popular topic out there. So a lot of the time, we are faced with low search volumes. So that is just a perennial problem of finance. But I think if, using tools like Moz, you can hopefully type in your initial keyword and it will give you broader ideas. You'll be able to link semantic concepts. So let's say if you type in X, it might tell you, oh, this word is relevant to that. And you might see that that's actually has far higher traffic. So just, I think, if you can, playing around with that. And then I think if on the technical side of things, again, there's probably definitely a problem in finance and perhaps many other industries where people like to sound very important. I certainly always tried to write really complex things when I first started out, just because probably I was a bit insecure and wanted to sound intelligent. And then, I think often what you see is that actually doesn't get the results. And, particularly with like long form pieces of paper, they serve a purpose, perhaps more sophisticated clients. Same with any industry, like if they want a big white paper, that's great. But I think if you can, and something I'd often recommend is basically trying to summarize a white paper in a blog or an article and posting both to your website and linking to the white paper from the short form article. And really with your short form article, use that as kind of perhaps something that's a bit cheap and cheerful. The white paper is for the really interested, really intelligent user, and the short form article is the slightly cheap way of getting traffic to it. So that's the one that you can really optimize for certain keywords and make it a bit more accessible. And often what you'll find is that that is the piece that gets the real traffic. So I think, if your company's comfortable with you doing that, try and maybe use that as the piece that's a bit more marketing-y, where you can flex your creative juices, if you will.
Okay, thanks. I was literally just writing another question. Can I just sneak in there whilst I have you?
Yes.
I was also going to ask about, with regards to adjusting like the alt text and the sitemaps and the metadata, is this something in your company that you do, or is this something that your, dev or Python guys kind of do? Do you control the CMS? Are you able to make these SEO optimization changes? Or is this something that two separate teams do?
So in my previous company where I worked on content, no, I would always have to ask someone to do it. Now that I work actually in the digital team, I have access, but I try and avoid logging in. I pretend to know that I don't know how to log into the CMS because it creates other problems for me. In that best way, it's just so that it frees up my time to focus on where my strengths are. But generally, like that would be like meta information. So I'd say yes. I think perhaps content or digital people, beyond the site administrator, perhaps should be able to access that. But I think things like sitemaps, if you're more on the content or just more digital marketing, you should definitely be involved in that conversation. But I think that has to be a partnership with IT, and they should really lead on that. Recent projects I've worked on where we've overhauled the sitemap, like some of the canonical links, so targeting different geographies and whatnot, that's been very much a partnership. And often I think they are perhaps have got the real understanding of that. So I think definitely involve like your IT or digital team as opposed to just trying to go it alone.
All right, thank you.
No worries.
Other questions?
So thanks for the presentation. What about this capital letters? So, for example, if you are mixing style with, for example, one words, which sometimes you are writing with the capital letters at the beginning or at the end, and you're mixing each together, and it's a bad practice, or you can do it, or how Google will react about that, because somehow you are putting different phrases, right? Even if it's the same word,
Yeah.
it's a different phrase because of the style. Is like that, or am I wrong?
So I mean, Google will never penalize you for capitalizing a letter, where it would kind of have a knock-on effect, and this is just personal to me. There's no, with the stylistic elements, there is definitely no right or wrong way, but I think there are agreed best practices. I generally think that after the first word, that should be capitalized, and then everything else should be lowercase, just because I think that looks neater on the eye. If you think when you have an article that is capital, lowercase, capital, your eye is just going up and down. It's not for me the best experience, but that's my view. And I think the main thing is just to agree what is the approach. Some people use title case, where I think you capitalize every noun or every adjective in the title. And that is fine. As I said, I don't think that looks great, but that's personal opinion. The main thing is just that you're consistent, because again, I think if, let's say, someone goes to your website and goes to your, let's say, your blog or your wherever you store all your content, and each title is written differently, sometimes with caps, sometimes without, it just starts to create that poor impression that it's not perhaps very professional. So it definitely doesn't. It's definitely something Google isn't looking at, but it's something that can have side effects in that people begin to get, this would be very extreme, but people might not want to read your content because there's the consistency is not there, and then then you start to see the data, the traffic goes down, or the dwell time, the pages per session, all of that starts to perhaps be affected, and that is something Google will look at to say, right, this content's not great. Of course, I think that stemming or being influenced by capital letters is probably quite extreme, but that's just an example of where consistency in whatever you do needs to be. You need to be consistent.
Okay, thanks.
No worries.
I have a quick question. Firstly, thank you very much for the presentation. It's fantastic. Just a really quick one. Have you noticed internally, did you notice a big change with all the kind of machine learning algorithms that came in, particularly BERTs that came out last year, the big core updates they've been doing that have kind of turned a lot of keyword research on its head? It's become more topic themed and more user engagement focused than it was previously. Have you seen any kind of shifts in traffic along those lines? I mean, I work with a lot of writers. We do a lot of content, and we tend to focus more on themes more than we did on keywords these days. We always start with, as you say, a head keyword or a head theme, and then we kind of branch off around behind that.
So for my sins at the minute, I'm very much focused on just getting the basics right. So perhaps I wouldn't be the best person to observe that, but in what I do observe, I haven't necessarily seen a big shift there. I do agree in that approach, and starting with the topics or big blocks, as we refer to them, that are important to your firm, and then working out the subsets within those, and then that kind of informs based on the client, well, both client feedback and sales feedback, or business priorities, which of those you should be prioritizing yourself. That's definitely the approach I take. So to some extent topic based. We're never really looking or at least how my Moz account is set up. It's not looking at specific keywords, or that they are in there, but they're all tagged or assigned to a big group. In finance, without boring people, but you've got like different asset classes. You've got stocks, you have fixed income, you have real estate. So that might be, if you're a fashion house, you might have sweaters, coats, trousers, etc. So I group everything up into those big terms. So again, it is definitely, perhaps by just nature or virtue of what I do, is kind of more topic led. But unfortunately, I haven't necessarily seen that's basically something I've always done. So I haven't necessarily seen if that's had an impact. But that may be just because, as I said, one, at the minute I'm a bit more focused on just the basics and where I'm at currently, and two, I've kind of always followed that kind of topic-based approach.
It's an interesting theme at the moment, and it's something which we've seen. I've got access to a lot of kind of data across different sites, and you do see things ranking which you don't expect to be ranking. And generally speaking, it's because the intent is being met by something which is completely the opposite of what you started with. So the intent could be met by a photograph, it could be met by a video, it could be met by, it's a big and kind of fascinating subject now, but it's, Google's a mystery at the moment. Had a big update again last week or the week before, and it seems a big core update on the 13th.
Yeah, I mean, that is SEO is an evolving beast. I forget which update it was, but the one maybe Hummingbird, where, as you said, it's more looking at intent and keyword stuffing, and a lot of the black hat tactics were then penalised. Of course, now we've got I wouldn't say threat, but the advance of voice search, which perhaps has a bit, will have a big influence, maybe not just yet, but a big influence on keywords, insofar as I think, when you're, just as an example, when you are typing in on a computer, you might just put white t-shirt or, spaghetti bolognese. Whereas if you're speaking to an Alexa, your search query might be, how do I make spaghetti bolognese? So that you're beginning to have to look at like phrases as opposed to just words. So, it keeps us, it's exciting. I won't pretend that I'm a master of all the updates, but it keeps us in our job, I guess. But yeah, SEO is definitely an evolving beast.
It's got a lot more interesting. It's got a lot fairer. Over the years, it's become a big equalizer. Basically, if you've got a quality message and you've got a quality website, technically speaking, then you've got a good chance of ranking these days. 10 years ago, it was a lot more difficult. It was a lot more difficult to start with an idea and to get a website ranking than it is these days. And most of that's down to kind of semantics and machine learning. And it's interesting.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more there, insofar as, maybe 10 years ago you could just hack your, via some black hat tactics or black magic, if you will, put your link up. One, not that I was I still was at university then, so I can't vouch for that personally, but that was the practice. Whereas now I think it is really looking at the quality and the intent, and so it's perhaps a sign that you need to some extent be very close to your content team, because one thing I've always found, particularly when I was in content, you'd have an idea and just start writing something, and then you're often your digital team and say, well, what are your keywords? And this is where you need that joined up approach, because often editors, if they're slightly more old school, they perhaps join from like a newspaper or whatever. They may not know what SEO is. They may not know what keywords are. So then, you often find digital marketing coming in at the end saying, oh, you need to include these keywords. And then, the editorial team saying it's too late, it's been complied or whatever. And they just need to rework the article to include them. So it's definitely an interesting thing that maybe, I should have mentioned, is just to have, a nice thing to think about is to have that list of keywords or whatever, the topics, have that discussion with your content or your editorial team, and make sure there is a partnership there, because it's as much about the quality of the article as it is, if not more so now, about the quality of the article than it is, say, keywords. So it's definitely
and it comes down to the ease of the article as well. What you were saying about copy, keeping it simple is the most important thing. I've got nothing to do with finance. I don't invest or anything, but I do read the Motley Fool regularly. I subscribe to all the updates simply because I love their copy. But I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
I've got a question for you, OJ.
Oh no.
Yes. So have you found yourself in a situation where you have written a blog post and then suddenly you are positioning that blog post in a keyword that you never expected, and then the blog post is driving a lot of traffic, and it's like, hell, this is driving a lot of traffic and I need to exploit it, But how would you do that?
So as in you wrote a piece of content, but like you found that another keyword is driving.
Suddenly that keyword is driving you a lot of traffic and you never thought about that keyword at all, and it's not even relevant to your business, but it's driving you a lot of traffic because it's positioning very well, because no one has already written about this, or maybe because it's something that is not quite often, and then suddenly that's driving you a lot of traffic, and then you need to, of course, because maybe you have a lot of bounce after reading that blog post, because they only want to know about that keyword that you wrote.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I haven't found that situation. That's not because I'm the master at SEO. I just haven't found that situation. But I think if it definitely does happen. So I think probably what you'd need to maybe do is, if you think it's really not relevant, is to perhaps consider rewriting the existing article so that you're no longer targeting or appearing for that keyword. But then equally looking at what that keyword is, and then seeing if it's really not relevant, then there's probably maybe a problem there. But if it is relevant, maybe using that as a keyword to write other topics, because if you think you've written an article about X and say Y is driving traffic to it, you think how much more traffic you could get if you actually wrote an article dedicated to that keyword. So I see it as kind of an opportunity and a blessing. I think one, just review the existing article to make sure that something's not gone wrong, because really I think your keyword should generally be relevant. And then look into what that keyword is and see if you can exploit it with other articles, or maybe something's happened out in the market that you're not aware of. Again, look into that to see if it's an opportunity. It might be a new way of marketing your product.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have one, OJ.
Sure.
How many, when you do your keyword research to write an article, how many related keywords do you try to gather in order to give a lot of semantics to that piece of content?
But when it comes to actually the lists, I think again they can be any size. I tend to err on the smaller sides because I like to really dig down, and I think where I've worked in content, I know what kind of words we could use. So I try to provide quite an exact list of around, say, 50 to 100 often to the editorial team. But, I think a year or two ago, I did my Moz course, and they were saying, put in your keyword in the Explorer, let's say white t-shirt, and then just download the entire list of suggested keywords from that. And, maybe use a filter to begin filtering out those. So maybe filter out those that have a difficulty of too hard, or that have difficulty less than 100. So have some way of applying a filter. So I don't think there's any wrong or right way, but Moz definitely recommends starting off with like 100, if not a few thousand, and then sort of more automatically applying a filter that can just get rid of a few of those, and then just having that as your list of maybe a couple of hundred. As I said, for me, just because of finance, where it can be quite specific and sometimes you have to be very careful with the words. I tend to actually look through every word. So I'm not using like broad filters. I'm just going one by one and saying, right, that's good, that's bad. So you can do it either way, but I'd probably say the first way of just, starting off with a topic, seeing what related keywords that brings up, and then just applying some sort of filter to create a list of a couple of hundred for that topic or keyword is a good idea.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. You talked about how to rank on your web posts and stuff. I'm assuming you meant if you have your own website. What if you're trying to post stuff and get followings on your social media, like your company social media and stuff? Would the same keyword search and all of that apply if it's just a post?
So social links aren't So there's two kind of aspects to this. Social links are now indexable by Google. So again, it does definitely help to think about what words people are using and to use them in your social posts. So because, for instance, if I type in just to say Malaga holidays and, you know, all my tweets, let's say use the hashtag Malaga holidays or have Malaga holidays in the copy, there's a chance, probably unlikely, but there's a chance that could appear in the search engine. So, you know, there's a higher chance that you'll get that traffic. So yeah, I don't think it's definitely a good thing to, you know, use your keywords across both your articles and your social. And equally, or just the second aspect on social is that it's not a direct ranking factor in Google. So, you know, some people think it's like a linking strategy. So as I mentioned in the first slide, the more links you have directing to your post, that's a sign of authority and trust to Google, and it will boost your ranking. Some people try and, not illegally, but it's not a good practice, try and increase the amount of links they have by doing lots of social to a specific post. And for that reason, Google doesn't pick that up as a genuine link, or doesn't include that as a ranking factor. But again, what you have to bear in mind is the more links and genuine links there are out there for your post. So let's say you tweet about something and it goes viral. Each one of those is, you know, like another link, and each one of those is potentially another hit or view to your page. And that is something Google does look at. So if, you know, you're getting a lot of traffic, which could be as a result of social media, that's going to tell Google that maybe this page is, you know, a good piece of content, and it begins to boost up your ranking. So yeah, I think definitely use your keywords, both from just like a brand standpoint in your social and in your articles. You know, I think you can begin to start to own that topic, or just by you know, awareness, be associated with that keyword or phrase. And equally, there is a chance that it will be indexed by Google and you'll get a page view. But equally, it's just a way of improving traffic to your site, which is something Google will look at.
On that note, sorry, it's a two-part question, if anybody wanted to ask. But on that note, do you have any tips on how to like reach, or on algorithms or something, like how to reach more views on that specific post, not on the website?
So,
like, for example, if I were to today, I wanted to post something like, hey, check out OJ at digital marketing, and I want everyone to view it. Is there a specific like algorithm I should follow? Like maybe tag people or hashtags or stuff like that?
So for the social post itself?
Yes.
So I think, again, this is perhaps something similar to what would be considered off-page SEO. Similar in that you often, for an off-page SEO, you'll be trying to speak to bloggers or other sites or publishers. You know, generally, I think in larger firms, you may have an agency doing this for you. But, you know, if in smaller firms, you may actually have to do it yourself. And no way is wrong and no way is right. But, you know, you could be talking to influencers or people to say, look, hey, I know you talk about cooking. I run a cooking website, and we've written this great article on, you know, 5 easy recipes in quarantine or something. You know, talking to them, emailing them, they might say, okay, you know what, that is an interesting article. And they may, you know, write a summary about your article, or maybe just include a link to your article from their website. And that then counts as a backlink to your site, which is really important. So you can employ that same strategy to social media, in that, you know, you can be reaching out to, you know, at least be following influencers in your specific field. And, you know, if they follow back, try and strike up a conversation with them and reach out to them. That just, I think, increases, you know, one, you could ask them to either write a post or just retweet your post. But, you know, at least if you're following each other, it hopefully increases the likelihood of them retweeting that or you know, sharing it. So I wouldn't necessarily say, or not that one I'm aware of, there's a specific algorithm to do, but, you know, definitely consider reaching out or contacting influencers. And I think, you know, similar to, let's say, how you write a meta description, you know, try and make sure that your content is, let's say, engaging, does include keywords, does include hashtags, and then hopefully, you know, the rest should do itself. But, you know, I think similar to keyword research, you know, look into your hashtags. And that's a very important thing. You know, they're not a million miles apart from one another.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do you use pages like Medium or like third-party like blog places where you put the content and then you replicate it on your own blog or something like that, or have you thought about only using Medium, or is it good, replicate, not, or what do you think about these pages?
I think there's definitely no harm in doing it. Like LinkedIn, you can post articles. Similarly on Medium, I think just where more recent roles I've been in, how that has kind of worked is, again, there's like compliance limitations around that. So often in finance, and I think it's just a tactic that can be employed in most industries, is to, you know, if you've got the money to speak to a media agency or a media partner and consider what I would call sponsored content, or like a native advertising campaign, where you can effectively guest blog on people's websites. So it may work every week, every day, every month, but they may say, you know, send us some text. We'll post that to our website, and then we'll include, you know, as a summary, and we'll include a link back to your website or to the full article as part of that. You know, so that's similar-ish to PR, but you know, a bit more formulaic in that there's often a set cadence and you're paying for it. Some people debate whether those links actually have the same value as an organic link, because often on those websites, let's say just like a partner website, they'll have their blog, and then maybe within that blog they'll have like you know, sponsored content or guest contributor. So often, I don't know this for a fact, but some people assume that Google may look at those things to say, right, if it's got, you know, like sponsored or something in the domain, in the URL, they may rank that less or give that less importance than something that doesn't have that. So I don't necessarily know if it, you know, like a sponsored content initiative could help with SEO per se, but it definitely will help with traffic. And, you know, where I've worked in content teams, that's something I've managed. And it's a very, very effective content driver. So it's not a million miles from SEO, but whether or not it has a direct impact on SEO is debatable. But, you know, I think, again, like Medium and LinkedIn, which are basically just free examples of the same technique, I don't think there's any harm in doing them. If you've got time, I think definitely. But, you know, I think if you've got the money, consider a media partner, just because it would hopefully save you time and just broaden out your reach.
But would you replicate the content? I mean, for example, if you have written a blog post and you place it on your webpage, would you replicate the same content on LinkedIn or on?
I would. Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea is great, but I would generally always try and change it slightly, so repurpose it, just because. And this is just a rule for SEO more broadly. Duplicate content can be penalised. So if you have the same, and this is where link canonicalization becomes really important. Let's say you have a website in 5 languages or 5 countries. So let's say it's you have a UK, an England website, an Irish website, and a Scottish website. You have the same page in all 3, and it's got the same content. Unless you tag and create that in the right way via the canonical tags, I can't really say that word. It may look to Google that you've got the 3 repeat pages. So you need to have a think about that. That's just a broader SEO point. And I think, and again, I'm not 100% sure, but I think, you know, when you're doing repurposing or sharing a piece onto other websites, you should just always, again, try and change it slightly. One is, you know, it's not on your domain, so there's less of the risk of duplication, but, you know, that is still a risk. And I think equally just think about the user experience. If someone reads the whole piece on LinkedIn and then they then go to the link or click on the call to action to perhaps the same article on your website, they're probably not going to read that again. They may bounce very quickly. You know, they may be frustrated because they said, "Oh, I've just read this. What was the point?" So I think always just either try and repurpose it or just use a summary or just a section from it to try and encourage someone to read the full thing on your website. So, you know, your website should always be the master, and then, you know, the other websites, be they blogs, social, whatever, or, you know, publishers should always be, in my view, like a summarized or slightly different version of it.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Last question, because it's getting late. Okay, if there is no question, I have prepared, wait, oh, come on. I prepared a poll, but I don't know if I can. Manuela, can you launch the poll that I prepared? Because I cannot, I don't know, for some reason.
Yes, I can.
It's telling, okay. So I'm asking for some feedback
All right.
about this.
It's out there. You won't be able to see it because you're already logged on, or because you're the host, but I think everyone else can see it, right? Pablo, can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
I don't know who Pedro Sanchez is, but I'm going to have to Google him.
You don't know who Pedro Sanchez is? He's the most important person in Spain right now. Also the most hated one, but yeah.
I'm embarrassed now.
It's just the president of Spain.
Oh, my bad.
My sister Googled him the other day. She's American, so she had no idea who he was. So she Googled him and she's like, "That is your president? I am going to move to Spain right now." She's from North Carolina.
Okay, yeah, I can agree. I agree.
Okay.
He's better than Boris Johnson.
Do we have all the results?
It says we're missing 2 people. Has anybody here not voted, or does anybody not see the poll?
Maybe
How
they
many
just.
people?
I
1,
don't
2,
know.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
We have
10.
13 participants, and then I cannot vote. So.
Come on, more votes.
We're missing 2 votes.
Anyway, just.
Close it?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to see the answers?
Yeah, please. But I cannot. Yeah.
Marriage. Wow, yeah. Thank you very much.
You've got a few proposals. All right.
Maybe even one from me.
Well, thank you for your feedback, everyone, and thanks for having me. It was really interesting and nice to meet you all. Hopefully,
Thanks
I'll
you.
do another one.
So we'll see all of you. You are invited for our next meetup that will take probably place at the beginning of June. It will be about marketing automation, and the speaker will be it will be about email marketing automation, and the speaker will be another ex-colleague of mine, and also led by the fabulous Rebecca. So it will be Tom Rush. It was OJ replacement at ITRS. So see you next time.
See you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Great talk, OJ.
Cheers, Beck. See you later.
All right, take care. Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Hasta luego.
Hello.